So that just happened. In case you missed it, this morning they revealed the PlayStation 5 Pro, which, like, when this happened in 2016 with the PS4 Pro, I remember it being really exciting. People were super pumped. Oh wow, we're already at the middle of the generation. We're gonna get reveals for a bunch of cool games that are specifically enhanced for it. I can't wait. And with the PS5 Pro, that level of excitement, I think, was there as the presentation began. Mark Cerny started going through the history of the PlayStation 5, why they designed it the way that they did, and what makes the PlayStation 5 such a capable piece of gaming hardware. And you know what, this makes sense. You know, they're kind of towing a line where they have to explain why you should want to spend a lot of money on a PlayStation 5 Pro, but they can't badmouth or talk down to the PlayStation 5 because that's still going to be available, and the majority of people that are going to be buying consoles in the next 4 years are going to be buying most likely a PlayStation 5 as well. So they have to kind of toe this line between explaining why the PS5 needs to exist and what it does well, while also complimenting the PS5 and being like, yeah, it's actually really good. You know, we love it dearly and it's amazing and you should love that still, but we can do this better over here. So it's kind of a weird pitch to begin with, but it's nothing that they're not used to. Like I said, they did it before with the PS4 Pro back in 2016, so they have some experience with it. And eventually, the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Cerny himself comes on screen and starts to explain what they're going to be doing with the PlayStation 5 Pro and what they need to do to enhance the performance and make it the most definitive console on the market, full stop. Everybody should buy it, blah, blah, blah. And he does this by showcasing how there are basically two modes in most games nowadays for the PlayStation 5, and that is a fidelity mode, or basically a mode that looks really pretty, and then there's a performance mode that looks a little less pretty but gets higher frame rates. And he reveals during this discussion something really, really interesting that I don't know whether or not it was made public before, but I found it pretty compelling.
When asked to decide on a mode, players are choosing performance about 3/4 of the time.
3/4 of the time. Like 75% of the time, people are choosing to play a less pretty version of the game to get better frame rates. If that doesn't tell companies like Sony and Xbox and everybody that they need to prioritize frame rates, that's what gamers are voting they prefer. I don't know what will. You know, I've defended the 30 FPS thing before because some of the best games of all time launched at 30 frames on console, whether you look at something like Red Dead or Breath of the Wild, or you go back and look at like Skyrim or something. Like all of those games that you know and love launched at 30 on console, and they were still great. But I think the point is, in 2024, things have changed, and gamers who now are much better equipped in terms of hardware, it's much more common to invest in your hobby if it happens to be gaming, they expect more from their purchase. They expect 60 frames at least to be an option. So I think Xbox should listen up. PlayStation needs to, of course, focus on that, which is kind of the pitch for the PlayStation 5 Pro, that they are aiming to combine fidelity mode and performance mode, so you get the frame rate of performance with the fidelity of fidelity mode. Simple pitch, makes sense.
Removing that decision, or at least narrowing that divide, is one of the key targets for PlayStation 5 Pro. We want to give players the graphics that the game creators aspire to, at the high frame rates that players typically prefer. To do that, PS5 Pro substantially improves over PlayStation 5 in 3 ways.
Ooh.
Here's what we call the Big 3.
Big 3. I like big things and I like 3, so I'm all here for it. However, when we look at the screen, something should jump out to you immediately. Larger GPU, number 1. Advanced ray tracing, number 2, as opposed to not advanced ray tracing. And number 3 is AI-driven upscaling. Now this, when I was watching it live on stream, which, by the way, I stream on Twitch, I stream on YouTube, we co-stream everywhere. Go look up Luke Stevens Live or Luke Stevens TV on Twitch and join us, because we have a great time. And when we watched this live, immediately, like, the red flag started going up. I was like, wait a second. You're saying for the PS5 Pro, 3 things are like new. You've added 3 things that are supposed to justify this upgrade. And 2 of them are the same thing. Larger GPU and advanced ray tracing. Ray tracing is all handled within the GPU. So 2 of your 3 things are basically the same thing. If you have so little that you're adding to your console that 2 of the 3 or big 3 are the same thing, it doesn't bode that well. Furthermore, there is no mention of any CPU upgrades because there isn't a CPU upgrade. With the PlayStation 4 Pro, they introduced a higher clock speed, kind of like a boost mode to the frequency of the CPU during specific like moments of gameplay. And that was aimed to reduce basically CPU bottlenecks in performance, which is something that's hit a lot of games recently as well. Apparently, the PlayStation 5 Pro just leaves the CPU as is. So they're not really going to be doing anything with that. So if there's any CPU bound games, the PlayStation 5 Pro presumably won't really offer that much improvement over the PlayStation 5's performance. You might be able to crank like texture quality or something, but if you are limited to like 40 frames a second or 30 frames a second because of CPU limitations, that's not going to magically change now. And then they get to the AI-driven upscaling and mention something called PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. And, you know, whenever I see a company, a big corporation introduce AI anything, I get a little suspicious because that is an investor buzzword through and through. It feels like nowadays if you put AI on anything, it will just magically be worth millions or billions of dollars because investors are just so needy to be involved in something cutting edge, I guess. But nonetheless, AI is here, and they say it's present with the PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, or PSSR, or as I prefer to call it, pisser. Yes, I'm very mature. I can't unsee it. And now that I've told you, you are not going to be able to unsee it anytime you look at PSSR from now through the rest of this generation. I guarantee you, every time you look at it, you will think pisser. You're welcome. Having said that, though, this is basically their own version of like FSR or DLSS. This has been rumored for a long time. They say that it's also hardware enhanced, so they have stuff on the actual chip in the device that specializes in this upscaling, which again is a great addition. I'm glad to have that. I don't love that we are reliant on upscaling to get games to run well, but it does seem like it looks pretty good in these shots that they provide. It actually does look very, very sharp. I've actually been playing The Last of Us Part 2 intermittently over the last few months. It's just an interesting game to pop into to get an idea of where like Naughty Dog might be heading in the future. But as you can see here on YouTube at 4K, if we even do stats for nerds, you can see this is encoded with VP9. That's the transcode that YouTube used. So this is a very, very high quality image. Not the craziest bitrate ever, but still looks pretty good. And even there, like, we're seeing a lot of detail in foliage off in the distance. You see grass density is greatly improved. Texture quality seems to be improved. And you continue to see this difference when they put it side by side with the fidelity mode on the base PS5 versus the enhanced version from the PS5 Pro. It does look much better. It seems as though you're getting fidelity quality at performance frame rates, which again is very cool.
The best nutrients for their best
rates, which again is very cool. I will say I think it's unfair. A lot of people have been going to like low bitrate videos from like Twitter or X, I guess, or TikTok, and then they build side by sides and they're like, I can't even tell the difference because the bitrate's so low and it doesn't look good. So I want to be fair. That's unfair to compare those. There is a difference between the PlayStation 5 Pro and like performance mode, which they get to here in just a second, but pulling up like a Twitter video is just frankly not fair in my view. You can see here a Last of Us Part 2 comparison with some very, very clear-cut side-by-sides. I mean, I think this is just pretty clear. There is so much detail lost in the performance mode on the base PS5, where you can see detail levels in the glass is just gone. You can't even read the signs that are on the watchtower, whereas on the PS5 Pro, you can actually make out Fedra. You can see much more detail in the windows. They've been able to crank the mesh quality as well. Other things like the barbed wire around here is just completely lost in the PS5 performance mode, whereas over here, it actually renders it all the way through. Here it's just lost with the lower resolution, but here it's retained. So there definitely is a difference. And I got to give them credit for that because there is a difference. But whenever you're trying to justify an expensive hardware upgrade, if I have to pause the video and zoom in and look for it, like the improvements, I'm starting to think maybe the improvements are not that clear or not that overwhelming. You know, like if I really have to search for it, is it that big of a difference? And then they double down on AI stuff and like AI is amazing and all this. It really just feels as though this whole thing is meant to appeal more to investors by signaling that they have AI stuff that they can do now, as opposed to justifying to gamers and customers what is actually capable with this device that was not possible on the PlayStation 5. They show some really pretty shots of Horizon, for sure. Horizon's a very beautiful game. They say they can do new lighting stuff they couldn't do before, which I'm sure is true. But honestly, if you told me this was a clip from the PlayStation 5, I would probably believe you as well. That's not really a diss on anybody other than to say that Horizon Forbidden West looks really good. But the point is, this is not a big leap or anything. And so that makes it all the more shocking when we get to the end of this presentation and they reveal just what this is going to cost. This is the PlayStation 5 Pro, ribbed for your pleasure, and it is launching for $700 in the US. Not to mention, the vertical stand is sold separately for $30. If you want to buy the stand, this little stand to make your PlayStation 5 Pro stand upright with proper airflow, you have to spend an additional $30. Beyond that, there is no disc drive.
That's a big fuck you by PlayStation right there. That's a huge fuck you by PlayStation right there. Hey, yo.
Included either. So if you want that, you have to spend another $80. So if you want a PlayStation 5 Pro in the US with disk drive, just as you would expect, and with a vertical stand, you're gonna have to spend over $800 for differences in visuals that you can see in specifically enhanced games. But like, you have to really, really look for it. Needless to say, people are a little perturbed. People are further perturbed because the prices are pretty insane, even across different currencies. Depending on where you live, of course, where you can get the game. Depending on where you live, this console could cost you as much as $1,000 Australian. It could cost you the equivalent in the US of like $850 if you happen to live in the EU. It's extremely expensive. And I understand there's mitigating circumstances. You know, the value of global currencies have kind of gone into a shredder in the last like 3-4 years since COVID. And, you know, that's because of inflationary pressures. That's because of monetary policies from various governments and all sorts of stuff that is not really relevant in a gaming channel like this. I can talk about it at length on stream because then I can kind of flex my finance degree. But other than that, it's just not that pertinent here. But what gamers know and will take away from this is that it is very expensive, even in the US, where it's like technically the cheapest. But if you live anywhere other than the US, it becomes disproportionately more and more expensive, which is baffling. And then to see them go and nickel and dime over things like the vertical stand or the CD drive, or even just like, I remember there were rumors that they were going to include the DualSense Edge, like the Pro whatever controller that PlayStation has, in the PS5 Pro box because it's a Pro device. So you provide the Pro controller in the box. Nope, it's the basic PS5 controller. It's crazy. It's actually crazy, especially the vertical stand. That's one that just pisses me off more than anything. Like the gall to sell such an expensive device that I'm sure is technologically like really impressive, this and that. But to sell this and then take the stand out of the box that probably cost you pennies to make just so you can squeeze an extra $30 out of people. It's the most Apple way of doing things. And, you know, I had a sneaking suspicion this would be an expensive console, but I don't think anybody expected the gap between like the US dollar and pounds and euros and yen to be so drastic.
I thought it was going to be 500. I thought they were going to bring the price down on the other ones like they normally do. And that was going to be it. Nope. The regular PS5 is still $500, and if you want a PS5 Pro, $700.
It's pretty jarring. And frankly, if you go through the comment section, you can see a lot of people that are a little like underwhelmed with the reveal. You can see people that are like, oh, this is what the PS5 was supposed to be at launch. Now we're finally getting it. You see other people mentioning how crazy the price point is and frustration over the disc drive. And it's kind of hard to gauge how people are feeling at any given moment with this. But when I did a poll on stream, we had about 1,000 people vote on it very, very quickly. Not a scientific poll or anything, but 95% of people, as you can see in this clip right here, 95% of people in chat thought that this was not worth the price of $700. And that's not a question of whether they're going to buy it. That's not a question of whether they're a PC gamer or an Xbox gamer or a PlayStation gamer. That is just simply asking them, do you think this is worth $700? And overwhelmingly, people say conclusively, no.
I'm gonna give my opinion. 100% not worth $700. Save your money. Come talk to me. I can help you build a PC. You know what I'm saying? Like at that point, might as well pay me $700 because what?
They just don't see it. What's even crazier than the price point, though, is that this is still almost certainly going to sell out. I mean, let's just be honest. It's going to sell out. Apparently, the disk drive, the separate disk drive thing that is available for purchase right now for the slim variant of the PS5, that apparently is selling out right now. People are buying it up in preparation for the PS5 Pro because I guess reasons. And listen, there's a lot of different ways to look at this. You know, some people are like, oh, this is all because of Concord. Sony is struggling to pay the bills, so they're going to try to milk everybody for all they're worth with this. And I mean, I don't think that's necessarily fair. This stuff was in the works well before Concord launched, so I don't think it's that simple. But what this is, I think, reflective of is a broader problem within Sony, which is that their margins are so freaking tight that they cannot find a way to really increase profitability to the satisfaction of Mr. Totoki, who is their new CFO and is the big guy pushing a lot of these changes. It seems like he's the one that pushed Jim Ryan out the door because he was greenlighting all of these failed live service projects and wasting billions of dollars on acquisitions that didn't really make sense. And so they're trying to find any which way they can to get more profitability out of it and to increase margins. That's why the vertical stand has been separated in the slim models and in the PlayStation 5 Pro. That's why I think they're doing things like selling their live service games for $40 instead of going free to play, though that might change with Marathon, time will tell. But all told, I think PlayStation is in a really weird spot. They don't have any brand new first party games that they've shown off recently. They released a couple this year, but they were Helldivers, which was successful, certainly, and Concord, which we all know how that went. And so now they're trying to sell a $700 piece of hardware that if you want basic accessories that should frankly be included in the box, you're going to need to spend $800 US. And then they have nothing else to show for it. Like, you're just supposed to buy that console to replay games that are 4 or 5 years old that have been enhanced for it. And then they have other things they say like, oh, it has Wi-Fi 7. Okay, that's a cool thing if you have a like $400, $500 router. Cool. They have other things like a system for enhanced performance through backwards compatibility of PlayStation 4 games, which I'm pretty sure is already a thing on the PlayStation 5. So I don't know how that's a feature specific to this, but I'm struggling to find like where the selling point is.
There's none. There's no selling point. They just want your money. Go give it to them.
You know, like these games that are years old look a little bit better. Please give us $800. I just don't see it. And I think some people perhaps fairly will point out this is not really meant to be purchased immediately, in which case I would.
Hey, you know what? They had a good catalog, bruh. They had God of War, Spider-Man, Last of Us. That's them joints old, man. Them joints is old now. It's time for something new.
Well, then why are we selling it right now? But fair enough. People are saying this is basically a GTA 6 machine. This is a product that's being put out now, but ultimately
GTA 6 machine.
It will excel when these big AAA huge games come out next year for the PlayStation 5 and PC and stuff. And those games will be able to take advantage of the hardware. Games like Death Stranding 2, GTA 6, and stuff like that. And I think that that's probably ultimately what this is targeting. This is targeting the people that want to play GTA 6 at launch and want the best experience possible. I think that's fair. I don't think it changes how ridiculous it is to charge $30 for a vertical stand that you used to include in the box. I think it's ridiculous to take away the disk drive, pretending like you're just offering gamers more opportunities and more choice like they did with the PlayStation 5 initially, when ultimately it was just a ploy to basically sell you back something for more that should have probably been included to begin with. It's, again, just the best example is Apple which I've seen a lot of people comparing this to, where it's just nickel and diming everybody, and they're hoping that the brand is enough to carry them across the finish line and get people to not ask too many questions. And you can see here in this tweet from John Linneman from Digital Foundry, he says, so with the disk drive, we're looking at 920 euros for us here in Europe, eh? That is interesting. The 3DO has been defeated. And then they even point out Apple wheels or PS5 Pro, tough choice, which is in fact true. Apple sells the wheels for their Mac Pro for $700. If you want little wheels on the case, it's $700.
What?
It just screams Apple energy, what PlayStation is doing. And maybe their brand is robust enough that they can get away with this. And honestly, I expect them to still sell out here and probably
You heard that? They sell the wheels for the computer.
wheels on the case. It's
$700 for the wheels. Them wheels is titanium, boy.
$700. It just screams Apple energy, what PlayStation is doing. And maybe their brand is robust enough that they can get away with this. And honestly, I expect them to still sell out here and probably do just fine. And this will sell millions of units and everybody will just go along with it, which is ridiculous in my view. I think it's silly to buy something like this when there's just frankly
Apple meant for the rich and dumb, bro. Like, I'm not saying the iPhone's alright, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's the best phone, but it's alright. But you buy Apple computers? Nah. That's the only thing they got is a phone and some earpods.
no games for it. There's no reason to buy it right now.
And the watch. They got the Apple Watch. I like the Apple Watch. I ain't gonna lie. That was a good idea.
Still, it's gonna sell out everywhere. Scalpers are gonna pick it up, and it's just
you,
gonna be
Apple
more
for the
stupidity.
rich.
So buckle up. And I know people will just say, well, adjusted for inflation, this isn't that bad.
I want that shit. I ain't gonna lie.
Sorry.
Only Jeff Keighley posted say, well, adjusted for inflation, this isn't that bad. I get it. The one and only Jeff Keighley posted, for example, here are inflation adjusted prices for me.
Bro, the PS1 was $600? The hell? Do not remember that. PS1 was $600. God damn. $611. PS2 was $546. Sounds right. It's still pretty high. Damn. Man, Xbox came out cheap. I gotta look at Xbox prices because no way. That's a lot. PlayStation 3 was $700. I do not remember that. I remember the PlayStation 3 was like $400. This is bullshit.
Mainline PlayStation console.
You call it bullshit, right? I call it bullshit too, bro. This is bullshit because I think the PS3, I think I remember that one. Bought that one, I think. That shit was like $300-$400.
Since launch. The PS1 adjusted for inflation, $611. PS2, $546. PS3, $778, which, I mean, it was crazy, but yeah, that's why people were like, PS3 is so stupid expensive, because adjusted for inflation, it would be like if it was priced $778 today. PS4, $538, PS4 Pro, $522, PS5, $606, and PS5 Pro, $699. But I think the difference is all of this was pretty much in line with standard inflation rates. You know, like the economy was pretty normal during those times. Yeah, we had a couple blips like 2008 to 2009, but inflation wasn't insane during those times to the point it is now. Nowadays, in the span of like 4 years, people's purchasing power has dropped by like 20 to 25%, depending on where you live in the US or globally. That's insane. And it's happened so quickly, people's pay hasn't risen. They're making the same amount, if not less than they were back when these consoles initially were launching. And so to see a console like this launch at $700, I understand why, but it just seems very out of touch to do that when people are already barely scraping by, and then to nickel and dime every step of the way with like a vertical stand that's $30 on the side. And I think that's why you're seeing the reaction you're seeing right now. Basically, like to dislikes are split about.
You know what though? Realistically, they always done that shit. You're right. Nah, when I got it at 611. Nah, I was just saying inflation wise, but back at that time, shit. Who knows, bro?
50-50, about 75,000 up votes, 75,000 down,
I
which
remember when everyone said when 2K went from $40 to $60, everybody said they're gonna boycott that shit. Person boycotted that bitch. Everybody bought that shit. Matter of fact, you know what they did? They the next year after that, they released the they said if you pre-order the game, you get to play 3 days early. Everybody pre Niggas went from boycott to pre-order that bitch. That shit was
make of
funny
that
as
what
hell.
you will. And the comments on it after the fact are pretty telling as well. $700 no vertical stand or disk drive is insane. That's too generous. Should have sold the controller separately too. It ended so abruptly after the price reveal, like they just threw a flashbang in the room and ran. I'm shocked that the controller and the power cord aren't sold separately at this point. Y'all lost your minds. $700 without a disk drive is diabolical. So okay. Anyway, there's all sorts of different ways that we can look at it. I personally think that the price is a lot, and I expected they would probably land at this price. I just thought that the offering would be more impressive. I thought that it would be able to do more. I thought they'd have more stuff to show. I thought that they would certainly have at least a little something, maybe a new trailer for like Death Stranding 2 showcasing visual fidelity only really possible on the PS5 Pro or something. But instead they're like, hey, play 4-year-old games that look a little bit better if you pause and zoom in, and please give us $700. And then if you want, again, everything that should be in the box included, in my opinion, you need to give us another $150. It's
Right.
just, I think, not a great value. It's and I'm saying this as somebody that loves to spend money frivolously. I mean, I'm a YouTuber, for God's sake. Like, clearly, if anybody could justify this purchase, it would probably be me. And yet I'm looking at this and I really just don't see any reason to. Maybe by November, by the time this comes out, we'll have more games or trailers or stuff to see running on this hardware and it'll make more sense. But as of right now, I don't know why anybody would buy this thing. I just don't get it. Maybe it ends up being way more impressive than it seems now, but
Not a
two
real
of the
reason to buy
3
it.
features are basically the same thing. And beyond that, it seems like the improvements are pretty minimal, visually at least, compared to what you're able to achieve on a regular PlayStation 5 at this point. So I don't know. Let me know what you think.
That's a good outlook. That's a good way to outlook on it. Realistically, wait, save your money. If you're going to get it, wait and see if there's any games going to come out for it, and then get it. You know what I'm saying? Personally, I highly doubt it. I haven't seen an original for a PS5 for a minute, so at least a good one.